Crossmaglen man, who the Sunday Life has dubbed the Border Bandit, I'm not sure if he calls himself the Border Bandit, but we'll find out, has pled guilty to a battery of offences, it has to be said.
Yeah, it's when I say, well, it's probably more than several. It's more than a dozen.
16 charges in total.
Yeah, there's drug dealing offences which involve the conspiracy to supply cocaine. When I say conspiracy to supply cocaine, I mean huge amounts of cocaine, vast sums of cocaine, and money laundering offences totaling tens of thousands of pounds. Be in no doubt about it, this guy Brenton O'Callaghan was one of the biggest drug dealers on the border, if not the biggest drug dealer on the border. He would have controlled a drugs empire stretching throughout Southdown, South Armagh, Louth, Cavan and Monaghan. This guy is a big fish in as well. When you talk about Ireland, a small enough pond, he'd be one, I would be confident to say he'd be probably one of the biggest drug dealers in Northern Ireland, if not all of Ireland.
He's from Crossmaglen. What else can you tell us about him?
Well, he's been a criminal for a long time, and he's been involved in drug dealing for a long time, and he was caught as a result of the EncroChat phone network hack. So what had happened was, just a brief summary, EncroChat was a secure phone network which was beloved by criminals throughout Europe. They used it to conduct drug deals. When I say major drug deals, millions of pounds worth of cocaine and cannabis. They used it to import firearms. On some occasions, they used it to plan murders. So it was an encrypted phone network. You would have bought the phones for around £1,500. Yeah, you went online with them, and then it was a secure network which the authorities couldn't get into. What happened was, in March of 2020, just as COVID was happening, and this is why it kind of got overshadowed, because the world was talking about COVID. It was the biggest news story probably ever. So in the start of March 2020, the French authorities get into the phone network in France, and they start sharing information with other police authorities throughout Europe. So rather than go and immediately make arrests, what the cops throughout Europe agree to do is, right, we'll sit and we'll watch these phones for the next 3 months. We can see the messages that are being exchanged on these phones. We'll use that as intelligence, and we'll use that as a method to go and do drugs raids. So between March and June 2020, the cops in the PSNI and the Garda over here, they sit and they watch these phones, and they're getting huge. They're having, over this 3 month period between March and June 2020, they're having huge success in seizing drugs. And us as journalists, I remember sitting in newsrooms going, geez, the cops are really on the ball here. You know, must have a high level informant, because it wasn't a week went by during that period where they weren't seizing huge amount of drugs. They had the largest ever seizure of drugs in Northern Ireland's history during that period up in Templepatrick. I think they got near £10 million worth of cannabis. But it transpires they were able to get that because they had access to these EncroChat phone networks, and they were able to see the messages that criminals were passing around about the importation of drugs and the supply of drugs.
And clearly, because we've talked about EncroChat, we have a specific podcast on EncroChat. Clearly, we've laughed at sort of the stupidity sometimes, because people are quite open about who they are on EncroChat a lot of the times, but they clearly felt very secure.
They were lulled into a false sense of security. So what happens is that is about 6th or 7th of June 2020, EncroChat realised that the phone's been hacked and that the authorities are in on it. So they send a message to all EncroChat phones, a warning message, a bit like the one we had last week from the government. You know, the phone bleeps, it goes beep like that. Dump your handsets, dump your handsets.
Dump your carbon units.
Yeah.
They call them carbon units.
Yeah, we've been hacked. So everyone then freaks out and dumps the phones, but all the criminals who have one freak out and dump the phones. But by then it's too late. You know, they're already caught. And the other thing you have to bear in mind, and this is a perfect storm for the cops at the time too, was because to use EncroChat, you had to go on to a wireless network or some sort of internet provider. So what had happened is, during COVID, coincidentally, all the restaurants were closed. All the bars were closed. All these areas where you could access public Wi-Fi, they were all shut down. So before, criminals would have went to a bar and used EncroChat. You logged onto the Wi-Fi there and used it. So they didn't have the opportunity to do this anymore. So some of them were that stuck. They were using their own home networks. And this is what happened too. So there was over 40 people arrested and charged with EncroChat-linked drug dealing offences in Northern Ireland. And quite a few of them, they weren't caught with handsets. You know, they're being charged on the basis that the police can link these drug deals and these messages to their Wi-Fi systems.
The French authorities hacked into EncroChat in March 2020. Just a month later, O'Callaghan's home gets raided.
It does, yeah. And he's under investigation. And then there's a raid a few weeks after that there. But they find an EncroChat phone. They don't find it in his house in South Armagh. They find it on the other side of a boundary wall, on the sort of rural road area of the boundary wall, but it's his wall, but it's on the public side of it rather than the private side of it. So they get the phone there. He denies the phone's his. He denies the phone's his for a few years, and then 2 weeks ago at Belfast Crown Court, he's rearraigned on charges of major supply of cocaine and money laundering, and he pleads guilty. So he drags this on for about 4.5 years, but now he's entered pleas and he's looking at a significant jail sentence.
The subsequent police searches of O'Callaghan's home in July 2020, just a few months after that, led to the seizure of another 2 mobile phones, £2,000 in cash, and a quantity of cocaine hidden in an oven. Why they hide them in the oven, I don't know, because that's the first place I'd look.
Yeah, I don't know. I've no idea. I could think of better hiding places if I was looking to put something away, but no, I know. You'd be afraid of someone not knowing it's there and coming along and sticking the chicken in on top of it and turning it on. And then that's all your drugs ruined.
Not to mention the chicken.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that, but that's a whole other